On today's show, KJ Martin reportedly requesting a trade away from the Houston Rockets. We'll unpack what that means, why he may have requested the trade request, and the position this puts the Rockets in moving forward. We'll also take a look at some of the options for the Rockets with picks 17 and 26 in this year's draft, some of the intel coming out in the days just ahead of the NBA draft, plus a draft profile at the end of today's episode. We'll take a look at one Nikola Jovic, all coming up right here on Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as the founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. As always, we appreciate you for making LOR your first listen every single day, free and available every single platform you can imagine: Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, check us out on YouTube. Shout out to everybody who comments on the YouTube pages. That's incredible. It's awesome. Check us out on YouTube. Go search for Locked On Rockets. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Some crazy news dropping this Monday morning in the days just ahead of the NBA draft. This 24/7 news cycle never stops. So we'll talk a little bit about KJ Martin reportedly requesting a trade away from the Houston Rockets, what that means for the organization, what that means for KJ Martin and his role moving forward. The viability of him being able to request a trade. We'll also discuss what the Rockets' options are, some of the intel in the days leading up to the NBA draft with picks 17 and 26. And then lastly, we'll talk about Nikola Jovic, one of the guys that the Rockets could be interested in with pick 17 and or pick 26, depending on how things play out with those two picks. Let's start with the big news. KJ Martin, reported by The Athletic's Kelly Iko, who, again, Kelly does an incredible job covering the team. You absolutely should be checking out his content. If you don't already, please go subscribe to him at The Athletic, along with the other quality writers they have there. But Kelly Iko reporting that apparently KJ Martin recently approached Rockets management to discuss the possibility of a trade from the franchise. Apparently, the nature of the conversation was candid. Basically, right, with potential moves following Thursday's draft, there's potentially going to be a logjam for the Houston Rockets. Now, they already did deal Christian Wood, right? So, that's one thing in and of itself to free up space for whoever they bring in at pick number 3, if it is Paolo Banchero, right? But there's guys like Usman Garuba, Alperen Şengün needs minutes, Jae'Sean Tate needs minutes, Eric Gordon is potentially maybe still on the way out, but at the same time, if he sticks around, that's another guy that's going to need minutes. And right now, there's not exactly a clear pathway to KJ Martin to receive the minutes that I guess he feels like he deserves at this point in his career, having just concluded his second NBA season. Now, this is kind of crazy coming off the heels of not even a month ago, little over a month ago, we had Kenyon Martin Sr. on Sirius XM radio talking about the fact that he wanted his son to be on a different team in a different position. He wanted him to be starting for an NBA team, and he wanted to be in a better position to succeed and all this. And at the time, I kind of brushed it off. I was like, you know what? All right. What dad doesn't want his son to succeed at the highest level possible, to put him in the best possible position to succeed? I just kind of chalked it up to a dad wanting the best situation for his son, right? Of course, he's going to be out there saying he deserves to start, he deserves this, he deserves that, he deserves more minutes. And even I was an advocate for KJ Martin towards the end of the season, saying that, hey, if he can keep this up, right, the three-point percentage, it's legit. His ability to attack off closeouts has gotten better. His dribbling game still needs some improvement, but it's gotten better, right? His defense, his man-to-man defense, his team defense, all of it, improvements across the board this past season. I thought KJ Martin should have started a few games this past year. And ultimately, I don't blame Stephen Silas for not experimenting with it, because there was kind of already that foundational trust between Silas and Jae'Sean Tate as the starter. So why throw a wrench into that? Why potentially piss off Jae'Sean Tate at the end of the season and start KJ Martin in place of him, right? If you're not going to shut him down. I'm not going to get too much down that rabbit hole, but overall, I think you look at this situation, KJ Martin has had some flashes, right? As a player, he's shown some promise. There's absolutely, some untapped potential there, but know your lane, man. You are a second round draft pick that was taken at 52nd overall a couple years ago. I get that there's maybe not necessarily, maybe there's some, question marks about what this team has in play moving forward, about who's going to be in what role, possible minutes, all that stuff. Absolutely, right? The Rockets are at a point where they're getting kind of squeezed, right? They need to start consolidating some of these young assets that they have, and you already started seeing the consolidation happen with Christian Wood, right? Trading him just for a late first-round draft pick just to get him out of the picture so that they can continue to focus on growing and developing the young guys, whoever they bring in with pick number 3, allowing Alperen Sengun to continue to grow and flourish as the new starting 5 moving forward, all these different things. And so KJ Martin is now the latest kind of casualty in this. And again, it's not that Kelly Eco did report there's no bad blood between KJ Martin and the organization, right? This is the organization that gave KJ Martin a chance at the NBA level. This is the organization that drafted him. There will always be that level of mutual respect and love between the Rockets and KJ Martin. This was more so, my gauge on this is more so an exploratory conversation of, hey, if there's not a role for me moving forward, if there's not an idea that I'm going to be getting a prominent role in this next season, then I would like to be moved somewhere else so that I can have a prominent role. Now, Kelly does mention that there are a number of teams, playoff contenders included, that have registered interest in KJ Martin in the past, sources said, with his combination of age, athleticism, and untapped potential deemed as incredibly attractive. So KJ Martin is a guy that if the Rockets are forced to potentially move on from him this early, it would be really disappointing, because he does have a lot of untapped potential, but he also doesn't have a whole lot of leverage in the situation, right? The Rockets still have him under team control for a couple more seasons. There's no reason why they have to move him. And again, he's not like a premier player that's able to demand a trade and say, oh, well, bench me, I'm going to stop. He's still trying to carve out a spot for himself at the NBA level. And so for this conversation to kind of come out right before the draft, it's odd timing, for this to jump out right now, but it could actually play out in the Rockets' favor, because while they do have picks 17 and 26 to kind of move around with and potentially trade up and make a splash and make something happen on draft night, if you suddenly entertain the idea of packaging KJ Martin with one of those 2 picks to another team where he could have a more prominent role, then that's suddenly a really enticing possibility for a team who maybe wants to be a bit more conservative, and rather than risk taking an unknown entity right at the top of this draft somewhere in the lottery, even if there's an exciting prospect, right? You see what KJ Martin has done so far. You have an inclination of what he's going to be at the NBA level. You see that he's got the tools to be a pretty high-level role player. The three-point shot has been relatively consistent. There's the athleticism there, a lot of untapped potential. It'd be unfortunate for the Rockets to deal him and then watch him flourish with another organization. But at the same time, if you're telling me they could package KJ Martin and maybe one of either 17 or 26 and move up into the draft lottery and get to maybe, pick 9 or 10 or 11 with the Wizards or the Knicks or the Spurs, somewhere in that range, I would be incredibly receptive to that as a possible avenue for the Rockets to explore. So ultimately, the fact that this conversation did happen a few days before the draft works out really well in the Rockets' favor, because now they understand where KJ Martin is at. They understand kind of where they stand with him. And if the two sides can't come to an agreement that they both find mutually beneficial, where KJ Martin isn't happy about what his role is going to be moving forward, if there is uncertainty with it, then being able to capitalize on that right here, right now, ahead of this draft or potentially, on draft night, is a really important win for this Houston Rockets organization. So ultimately, It'll be interesting to see how the situation pans out with KJ Martin. I don't think he, again, very little leverage for KJ, but it works out if this is if this conversation was approached in good faith of just, hey, I want to know where I stand, I want to know what the plan is moving forward, all of that, then both sides can work towards an arrangement that works out for all parties involved. And so far, that has been Rafael Stone's entire MO as the GM, is trying to do right by his players and trying to make things work out that not only work for the Rockets organization, absolutely, in the future of this organization and the team, but also benefiting the player that is directly involved, right? He's absolutely kind of rehabbed the image that the Rockets have had from the Daryl Morey era, where at times Daryl Morey just treated players like assets and was just, didn't really seem to care what happened with guys, just sending them left, right, and center. You're a trade asset, that's it. Whereas Rafael seems much more tapped into the human element of what it means to these players, about their situation, how they can, thrive as players either for the Houston Rockets or, if need be, with another organization, right? So those are my initial thoughts, reactions to KJ Martin, the situation at hand here. Coming up, I do want to talk about picks 17 and 26 and some of the reported rumors about what the Rockets are looking to do with those ahead of draft night. But first, we've got a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline, because betonline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and, of course, Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, the NBA draft, and more. And speaking of the NBA draft right now, you can take a look at the odds for who is going first, second, third, fourth, and fifth overall in this year's NBA draft. Right now, Jabari Smith Jr., the favorite to go number one at -180. Chet Holmgren is the favorite at number two, -150 there. And then Paolo Banchero, the legitimate, by far favorite to go to the Houston Rockets at number three overall, -600. So for all of that and more, be sure to check out BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, UFC, boxing, all the fighting stuff, including they've even got golf. Go check them out. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's continue tackling some of the latest reporting, intel, rumors surrounding the Rockets going into the days leading up to the NBA draft. So first off, Kelly Iko did report in that same article discussing the KJ Martin situation that there is another name that has emerged regarding the Houston Rockets assistant coaching search, and that is one Lionel Hollins. Hollins last worked for the Lakers under Frank Vogel during the 2020-2021 season. And he's actually widely renowned for kind of a defensive acumen as an assistant coach. And he actually really made a name for himself back during the Memphis Grizzlies grit and grind era from 2009 to 2013. So if that's the guy that the Rockets are looking to kind of bring in to kind of set the tone defensively, and also have an assistant coach on the bench who can just be, again, more of that enforcer type, somebody to really help set the tone for that Rockets locker room, in addition to John Lucas kind of helping to anchor those two guys alongside Steven Silas as he's growing and learning and really trying to take control of that Rockets locker room. That's an interesting name that they bring out, and I would love Lionel Hollins to become a part of this Houston Rockets organization. So love that bit of information there. There's also been Kevin O'Connor talking about the fact that the Rockets have heard, or KOC has heard rumors that the Rockets are trying to move up to number one or number two in order to take Paolo Banchero, being directly quoted as saying, "I had a source tell me yesterday that OKC is definitely a contender to take Banchero at number two." How much of that is OKC putting it out there knowing Houston's desire to take him? Ultimately, I think that this is absolute posturing by OKC at this point. At first I was kind of concerned that the Rockets may legitimately lose out on Paolo Banchero to Oklahoma City, but I just don't buy it. To me, it seems like Sam Presti kind of putting a smokescreen out there, as well as the Jaden Ivey stuff too at number two. All of this seems like Sam Presti just trying to, play tricks on the other guy, the other teams at the top of the draft, the Rockets, the Kings, whoever, trying to manipulate another team into giving him an additional asset so that said team, Rockets, Kings, whoever, can move up to take the guy that OKC had no plans to take in the first place. Like, a lot of this just feels like posturing from OKC. I will absolutely be aghast, shocked, in utter disbelief if OKC takes Paolo Banchero at number 2 overall. I think that my prediction right now as it stands is it's going to be Jabari number 1, Chet Holmgren number 2, Paolo Banchero number 3. I think the Kings are going to take Keegan Murray at number 4, and then I think Jaden Ivey falls to the Pistons at number 5. That's what I'm calling right now for the top 5 in this draft. That's the pecking order at the top 5. So I don't buy into the rumors that the Rockets are, feeling under pressure to trade up. I think that they're very much bought in on the idea of Paolo Banchero, but I think a big reason for that is they feel pretty safe about the idea of being able to get him at number 3. What's OKC going to do? Take Paolo Banchero at number 2 just to spite the Rockets and then miss out on the guy that they're actually higher on in Chet Holmgren? So at the end of the day, Sam Presti is an anomaly, whatever he decides to do. Honestly, you never really know what direction that man is going to go, but I feel fairly confident that Paolo Banchero will be a Rocket by the end of this week, even sooner than the end of this week, by Thursday night. So we're just a few days away. But let's also revisit one of the areas, right, is the Rockets have picks number 17 and 26, and the impression seems to be that Houston has a ton of flexibility to do a bunch of different things that they could, again, package those 2 picks together and move up in the draft. I just mentioned there in segment 1 that depending on how the Rockets decide they want to resolve this latest reported, situation with KJ Martin, that's another possible direction that they could go, where they could very easily package KJ Martin with one of those picks, either 17 or 26, to move up in this year's NBA draft to get back into the lottery and select a talent that they have their eyes more so on kind of near the top of the draft. Again, maybe you look at like a guy like an Ousmane Dieng type guy who might be going around 9, 10, 11 range, somebody who doesn't really have the chance to fall all the way down to 17 where the Rockets are currently at. So that is a distinct possibility. Again, the Rockets are very much in this position where they're going to have to start figuring out who's got permanent roles on this team moving forward, who they're bought into as far as the young talent that they want to keep and that they want to develop, versus the young talent that they're going to ultimately have to either trade, capitalize on, moving to other organizations, consolidating, right? You've only got so many roster spots. You've only got so much, room for developmental growth, as we saw last season with certain guys getting, the short end of the stick as far as the Rockets rotation was already considered. So with KJ Martin, if you manage to package him with 17 or 26 to move up, it's an interesting possibility. But again, the Rockets could also very much trade back out of the NBA draft, and I think that's a very distinct option there when you have pick number 26 now as well, as they could take pick 17, trade back out of the draft, not make all 3 of those selections in the first round this year. The other factor that I hadn't considered with either of those picks is that the Rockets could, right, potentially flip one, if not both of those picks for a bit more of like an established veteran force to also bring in to this lineup. Now, if the reports are true that the Rockets are still seeking a first round draft asset for Eric Gordon, then maybe he's the guy that's next on the chopping block, the next guy on the way out. And if Eric Gordon is on the way out, and if the reports are true, there's also reports that Dennis Schroeder is likely not going to come back to the Houston Rockets next season. I had already kind of brushed that off as, all right, Dennis Schroeder, thanks for your half season. I didn't expect him back anyways. But the Rockets are still a team that needs a little bit of veteran presence, right? If that veteran presence is Eric Gordon, awesome. I'm on board. If the Rockets decide they want to deal Eric Gordon, which it seems like there's enough interest in Eric Gordon, given the fact that he's basically going into the final year of his contract, seeing as how the 2023-2024 season is non-guaranteed. If the Rockets are able to flip Eric Gordon for a future draft asset, then they do need some level of a veteran presence on this team to kind of just help corral and anchor these young guys. That doesn't necessarily mean that veteran presence has to be the guy that's starting alongside Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. on the wings with this Houston Rockets team. I'd very much like to see potentially Jae'Sean Tate continue to be in that starting mold, especially if the reports are true that his 3-point shot has improved dramatically this summer. But having a guy that they could still have in the rotation that can play a consistent, 15, maybe 20 minutes a night here or there, and just have another veteran type guy out there to kind of play alongside some of these young guys would be beneficial for the Rockets. So maybe that's the direction they decide to go with one of these two picks, right? There are plenty of teams that don't have a first-round draft pick in this year's draft, and there are plenty of teams that are looking to get back into the first round of this year's NBA draft. So that could be what we see happen, right? The Rockets flip one of those draft assets, one of those picks, either 17 or 26, for a slightly more established veteran presence rather than bringing in a whole nother corral of rookies this season. So with that, some options around, again, 17, 26, packaging up, trading out, trading it for a veteran presence. All of those options currently on the table for the Houston Rockets, as well as, again, all the smokescreen and angling going on by the Oklahoma City Thunder at the top of the draft. Coming up, want to talk about one of the prospects for the Houston Rockets, a guy who should be available hopefully around pick number 17 and maybe around pick number 26 as well if the Rockets wind up making those selections. Nikola Jovic. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's talk a little Nikola Jovic, his Rockets draft profile, playing for the Serbian basketball team Mega Basket. Jovic is an interesting prospect, and I'm a little torn on him because I was really excited by him a little bit earlier in the pre-draft process, and then my interest in him has kind of waned a little bit the more that I've looked at him. Essentially his number one skill, the thing that makes him such an intriguing prospect, is his playmaking. I'd probably argue he's easily a top 5 playmaker in this draft, maybe even arguably like top 3. Like maybe you go Paolo Banchero, Dyson Daniels, Jovic. Maybe I don't think I'm missing anybody in there. I want to make sure that I'm not like skipping anybody off the top of my head. Oh, Benedict Mathurin is a sneaky good playmaker. Yeah, I mean I don't know if I'd put anybody else that I can see like being mocked ahead of him. Maybe you go Ty Washington ahead of him a little bit. I don't think I'm missing anybody. Jalen Williams is a sneaky good playmaker as well, but I'd say he's at least a top 5 playmaker in this class for sure. And that's really the skill that sets him apart from his peers and make him such an interesting prospect, because you look at the physicals for him. He's a forward. You play him at the 3 or the 4. He's 6'9 and a half, 7 foot and a quarter inch wingspan, weighs about 230 pounds. But the numbers don't exactly jump off the page at you. He scored just under 11 points per game, shot just 34% from 3, 3.3 assists per contest, 4.3 rebounds per game. This is a guy who's absolutely at his best when he has the ball in his hands, able to create for his teammates, either in transition in the open floor, using his court vision, creating that way, or even in the half court, right? He can operate out of the pick and roll, but he's also a threat offensively because he can operate out of the pick and roll both as the ball handler, but also as the screener, right? Somebody who sets a good screen and then can be on the receiving end of a pass in the pick and roll and then be an incredible decision maker in the middle of the floor, kind of figuring out, all right, am I attacking? Am I kicking it out to a corner? Where is the defense rotating to? How am I moving the ball? Again, his court vision, his playmaking, his general basketball IQ is what makes him such a incredibly talented prospect. But at the same time, there's a good foundation of skills there, but apart from the playmaking, there's not like any one thing that really stands out as far as like, oh, he's a pure bucket getter, or he's a great 3-point shooter, or he's great on defense. He's a great facilitator and playmaker, and that's basically what you're getting out of him. Now, there's some optimism, right? A guy with that level of size, again, you're about 6'9 and a half, 6'10, decent wingspan, 7 foot wingspan. He's got the physicals to be a decent offensive player when he does get, when he does attack the basket. He's got some size. He knows how to finish. He doesn't always use his size to his advantage. And he has absolutely zero post moves right now. So it's not like he's a guy that's going to be able to post up smaller players. Like if you're running him at the 3, or if he has a smaller player matched up on him, even if he's playing the 4, he's not a guy that's going to be able to post up a smaller player and go get his buckets down low in the paint or something like that off of mismatches. He is able to create his own shot. So he's got he's got a good handle, right? He's good with the ball in his hands, got a confident handle. He can create all of that. He can go get his own shot, but he's just right now he's an inefficient offensive player. There's no other way to kind of break that down. He doesn't necessarily finish incredibly well at the rim. Again, doesn't always utilize his size, a great majority of the time. Not a super explosive player. And then when you look at the defensive side of things, you'd think a guy with his physicals, his wingspan, his size, all of that would be able to be more of a deterrent defensively than he is, but sometimes a bit sluggish defensively. Maybe not necessarily the best on switches, especially if he gets put on smaller players. So again, earlier in the pre-draft process, when I was really looking at him, I'm thinking okay, this is exactly the kind of guy, you're looking at a point forward type guy, run your offense, all that. And there's a decent foundation for building up on that. And the other thing is he's only 19 years old. So there's a lot of room to grow for a guy like Nikola Jovic. And when you look at, say, some of the offensive question marks, right? The 3-point percentage, 34%, not the best, not the absolute end of the world. There's nothing he's got a good shooting form, right? Good release point, all of that. No issues there from me, or I have no qualms about it. So he's one of those guys that I think you take him and you bill him as, okay, he's got great basketball IQ, a great feel for the game, especially offensively, both with the basketball in his hands, which is where he's at his best, but also his ability to even play off the ball a little bit, right? He's a smart player when it comes to setting screens, cutting, operating without the basketball in his hands. So I think that is exactly something you look at and you think, okay, if this guy's smart enough to be able to figure out how to be effective offensively like this, both with and without the basketball in his hands, then, hopefully this guy can mold the rest of his game and become better, both offensively, defensively, all of that, and just become a better all-around player, maybe like a Swiss Army knife type of guy. Because again, there is that ability to kind of get to some spots offensively and create his own looks, create some separation at times to get to the shots that he wants. He just isn't a super efficient offensive player quite just yet. So I'm intrigued by him. If he's there, if there were other guys, there's still definitely guys that I would take ahead of him, right? I would easily still go Tari Eason ahead of him. I'd go Marjan Beauchamp. I really want the Rockets to prioritize adding some quality depth to their wings, in this draft with 17 and or 26 if they make those selections, which is why Tari Eason and Marjan Beauchamp are very much at the top of my board. But if Jovic is still there at 26 and they've already picked up a wing at 17, if they're making both selections, I wouldn't mind risking it for a guy like this, because I do think the playmaking is really interesting. He's a guy that I feel could really benefit from some time at the G League level to kind of round out his offensive repertoire, kind of see, all right, see how much more growth he has as a playmaker, really running an offense and seeing where he could be best utilized offensively on the floor by the Houston Rockets. And then conversely, you need to see a little bit more out of him defensively, right? Because right now, while I don't think he'd be a full-blown defensive liability, it's another one of those guys where the Rockets already have a guy in Alperen Sengun, who can create at a high level with the basketball in his hands. They're potentially going to draft Paolo Banchero, another guy who has high-level creation. Jalen Green can create. KPJ can create. Jae'Sean Tate can create. They've got a bunch of creators on this team already. So to me, the Rockets desperately need guys who can shoot the three ball, and they desperately need guys who can defend at a high level. Those are the two skills that I'm really looking for out of prospects that the Rockets are taking a look at with picks 17 and 26, which is why I'm probably a little bit lower on Jovic at this point than I was earlier in the pre-draft process. But his fit is still intriguing on this Houston Rockets team, right? Anybody that can play both with the basketball in their hands or without their hand, or off the ball like that offensively, and create at a high level for their teammates, that leads to some really impressive basketball being played, right? Good ball movement on the floor, guys who can attack and create at multiple positions, gives you a better chance offensively to thrive and succeed at the NBA level. So I do think Jovic, intriguing name for the Houston Rockets. Not one of my personal favorites, but I did want to cover him before we get through this entire pre-draft process. So those are some of my preliminary thoughts on Nikola Jovic, his possible fit with this Houston Rockets team, whether or not he addresses the needs for this Houston Rockets team currently. That's going to do it for today's episode. Now, you've got to be sure to go check out the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. If you haven't done so yet, search now for the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. Wherever you listen to your podcast, you're going to get over 50 insiders, the Odyssey Sports experts, the draft experts from Locked On NBA Big Board. The 5-episode Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is underway right now. Make Ultimate NBA Mock Draft your second listen today. But that's it for today's show. As always, appreciate you for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. Also, check us out on YouTube. Remember, for the house, for the team, for the algorithm. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. How do you feel about KJ Martin and his trade request? Let me know in the YouTube comments. Also, an Easter egg for all of our YouTube viewers. I just added this lovely, new piece of final office furniture here in my office area. And it's like this little cubby thing with 8 cubby holes. I don't know what I want to put there or on top of it. So I'm open to suggestions of what I should add for this area. I've got this bookshelf already filled up with Rockets memorabilia and stuff on the left of me. I need ideas for what to put on this thing over here. If you have a piece of art, if you do Rockets fan art or anything like that and you want to send it in, I'll display it right back here on top of this, and it'll be right here for every episode of LOR. So give me ideas for that in the comments as well. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.